This isn't the complete story of the Repco reliability trial. To tell the whole story of those 20,000 dusty, grinding kilometres would have needed 50 cameras, or perhaps more, and even then they couldn't tell the whole story. This is a personal view of the event, which many people have called the toughest motoring event in history. It's how the NBN crew, Jim Sullivan, Lindon, McLoed and myself, saw the rally, and how our cameraman Barry Nancarrow and mechanic Ted Hayes met the challenge of providing service backup for the crew. In between servicing the NBN Young and Green Commodore and fixing numerous punctures, Barry somehow found time to shoot some film. For most of the 167 starters in the Repco trial, scrutineering was the point when the rally suddenly became a reality. During all those long, tiring hours crews had spent preparing cars, the actual event had always seemed a long way off. But now the start was only hours away. As scrutineers checked compulsory safety equipment, first aid kits, survival rations, shovel, axe, water for 2 days in the desert, the wild nature of those 20,000 kilometres we were about to travel loomed ominously.
Well, here we are. The car has been scrutineered. That means that it's been passed as eligible to start, which is quite a weight off our minds. It always is, even though we didn't think there was likely to be any problem, but at least we know now that we're ready to start. Have seen some of the other Newcastle crews, and they've all passed scrutineering, and so it looks as though everything's in readiness for the start of the big event.
The rally, billed as the last great motoring adventure, attracted some of the world's best rally drivers and many rank amateurs. The coveted number 1 went to a Porsche driven by Edgar Herman, co-winner of the last Round Australia event in 1970. 2 other top internationals, Kenya's Shekhar Mehta and Finland's Rauno Aaltonen, were in the Holden team, and even before the start it was obvious that Holden and Ford would wage a battle royal. Never has a rally attracted such a wide variety of vehicles, ranging from a huge Chevy Blazer through to old model cars along for the run. And then the waiting was over, and at 1-minute intervals cars were flagged away. Later on during the event, as dust became a problem, cars would be separated by 2-minute intervals.
Well, here we are about to set off on what we expect will be quite an adventure. The first stage is in the forest north of Melbourne, and it's going to decide what the starting order will be for the rest of the night. After that, we know we've got some rough tracks, and we know we've got some sand, which could be very difficult. That's on the border with South Australia. So hopefully, the next time we actually stop, we'll be in Adelaide.
The first special stage, 48 kilometres of bush north of Melbourne, showed how furious the pace was going to be. At sprint pace, Holden's Peter Brock, Ford's Greg Carr and Jeff Portman in a Datsun raced into the lead. A good time moved us up from 63rd to 21st in the field, and things looked pretty good as we headed over back roads to Mount Gambier. Then the rain started and the dust turned to mud, and that brought most of the field to a standstill near Border Town in South Australia. Some of the later cars, alerted by two-way radio, were able to skirt the quagmire, but we were stuck fast for almost 3 hours.
Hey, mate. Before we do that,
It was very muddy. It really was very, very muddy. We've just spent something like 3 hours stuck in the stickiest mud that I think you could ever find. The only way we got out was eventually Finn bought a Mercedes four-wheel tractor for about $30.
For 200 yards.
And he towed us out probably the best part of a kilometre. Without that, there'd be no way we'd still be there.
200 yards.
I think about 40 cars have actually been pulled out, and there's still a lot stuck down there.
We thought nothing could be worse than the mud of Border Town, but as daylight broke, we faced a sandy trail along the dog fence which runs towards Renmark, and again we spent frustrating hours bogged. With time slipping by and the rally barely a couple of days old, our spirits were low when we reached Adelaide. But even a brief rest makes things look better, and the next day competitors were tackling the bottom end of the Flinders Ranges on the run towards Broken Hill, a run which would not end until we reached Perth. At Yunta, midway between Adelaide and Broken Hill, there was a chance to refuel and snatch a quick breakfast. In the case of Hal Maloney's crew, change a few shock absorbers.
Yeah, back shocks, mate. The shocks just keep throwing it in. We've got plenty of spares, but at the end of every second special stage, we've got to change them.
Even after 2 days, many crews were wondering just what they'd let themselves in for, and the dropout rate showed many were ill-prepared. Out in front, Jeff Portman's Datsun was leading from Bond's Cortina and Brock's Holden. From Yunta, the cars would head to Broken Hill and then turn west, back to the Flinders Ranges, north to Maree, finally south towards the Nullarbor.
Well, now we're at a little place called Yunta, which is 500 kilometres out of Adelaide into the start of the long grind across to Perth. It's headed us actually northwest, and I suppose it's about halfway to Broken Hill, but we haven't come up the highway. We've come up through rough old tracks in the back of properties, barren red dust soil, and at this stage, although we've lost a few points in there, where the car is still going perfectly well, and we're quite happy, and I think looking forward to the long grind on across to Perth.
For once, a creek crossing became a welcome sight. After an unending diet of dust, even a few seconds respite seemed like a milestone. We were re-entering the Flinders Ranges after heading north as far as Lake Frome. Parakilna Gorge near this crossing is spectacularly beautiful, but there was never time to look at any of the scenery. Some crews had opted to simply pass through the major controls, and almost 1/3 of the field actually turned left at Adelaide and drove straight to Perth. But we were determined to do the whole route. Those who completed the long loop through the Central Australian desert were very much alone as they battled the salt pans near Lake Eyre and the sand dunes south of Coober Pedy. Weary service crews faced a long wait on the desolate Nullarbor. In many ways, the rally was as tough a test for the service crews as the competitors, with crews covering vast distances at almost impossible speeds in grossly overloaded vehicles, then having to fix broken and bent rally cars in half the time a job might normally take. When the cars finally began to roll into the service points, there was no shortage of jobs to be done. The course had taken crews along a service road of the Trans-Australia Railway line, then through rolling sandhills in the Maralinga Atomic Test Zone, and finally over what many drivers considered was the worst horror stage in the event, 150 kilometres of rock-studded track which reduced cars to crawling along in first and second gear. Countless punctures actually eliminated some cars altogether. They were reduced to driving on bare rims.
The last section was extremely rocky, and course had to be taken against flat tyres. So we took our time through it, and it looked like we've still come out 10 minutes in front of the field, which is quite good. We're quite happy. The rest of the rally itself has been very, very good. Extremely rough in places, and sometimes very muddy. Last night we had an excursion off the road, and we ended up backwards in the spoon drain, and with the help of teammate Peter Brock, who helped winch me back on the road, we were able to continue without loss of points. I guess that's part of being a team, but and without him we wouldn't be here where we are now.
While the Holden dealer team came through without any serious problems, the rocks of the Nullarbor did trap other leading cars. Greg Carr smashed the differential of his Cortina, but was within 100 metres of his service crew. Andrew Cowan also had trouble with his Citroën and needed some urgent welding. While back along the track, the driver who'd led the rally, Jeff Portman, showed that there are times to slow down. He blew a total of 7 tyres, lost more than 2 hours, and the lead. He was able to keep going only because Newcastle driver Revs Rowney loaned him spare wheels. By this stage, Revs had emerged as the best of the northern crews, and his much-rallied Datsun 180B Coupe was in 9th place.
Yeah, well, that wasn't a very nice section at all. That was all rocks. We got one puncture, and it was then a case of taking it very, very easily because another puncture and we had no spare wheels left. Everybody seems to be in there just crawling along. The exhaust's not sounding right either, so we've got a few problems.
We had to limp across the Nullarbor to Norseman, where a garage owner let us strip our engine, and maps came out to find a way of rejoining the route without missing more controls than necessary.
Well, for us, like so many other competitors, the rally's become not so much a test of reliability, but a test of ingenuity. We had a problem last night with the cylinder head. We burnt an exhaust valve. We couldn't get an XU1 valve in Norseman or even in Kalgoorlie. So we've been to the wreckers and we've bought a cylinder head that looks pretty much like it might have been off an ex-cab, perhaps an ex-country cab's done a lot of miles, but it should do. Ted's working on that now. There's the old head, and of course it means that we've got the car pretty much in bits. But the way the rally is, provided we can get the car back together and going again within about 4 hours, we have a late time limit. As long as we can stay in that and rejoin the rally route, then we're still in the rally. That's the case for many of the competitors. Many have been forced to cut and run, to drop controls, run to the next one, to actually stay in the event. It's become so tough. Can't even speak properly. After last night's horror section, it really was a horror. But it's great fun, and we're still going.
Well, our second-hand cylinder head, which we bought for $15, got us back on the road again, and by Perth, we'd unfortunately missed 3 controls, leaving us way down in the field, but still in the rally. Others weren't so lucky, and as the field left Perth, it had been reduced to 130 cars. Fatigue was now beginning to tell, and on an easy stage around the Wanneroo circuit north of Perth, Jeff Portman rolled his Datsun. Just outside the circuit, his attention distracted for a moment, Colin Bond did the same thing. With the exception of one horror stretch through an army range, the run north was easy until we headed into the red dust plains around Meekatharra. The roads were open and fast, but deep washaways could loom out of the blinding dust, or the track could suddenly fall into a creek bed studded with boulders. At one point, about 10 competitors joined forces to manhandle their cars through a sandy riverbed. The trail took us through little-known towns, many virtual ghost towns.
Good morning. Oh, what a night we've had. It's 24 hours since we left Perth, and now we're, I'm not even sure where we are. Tropic of Capricorn. We've been going non-stop all afternoon and evening. We've just come through probably the roughest horror section of the trial, and there's another one to go later on in the night. All getting weary, but fortunately the car's going quite well now, and we're pressing on quite happily.
Crews came to relish the few minutes spent out of their cars during rest breaks like this. Since leaving Melbourne at noon the previous Sunday, we'd managed to get only about 7.5 hours rest in a bed, and would get no more until we reached Darwin a week after the start. Daylight saw the crews rolling into Port Hedland. It was about this stage in the event that the 3 Works Commodores emerged as the cars to beat. Their Ford rivals had run into trouble. Andrew Cowan was still there in the Citroën, but well back. The rest of the field appeared to offer little threat. By now, most drivers were thinking only about finishing. Crews had settled down to a steadier pace, but now had to cope with the unpredictable effect of lack of sleep just when they needed intense concentration to anticipate the hazards of the northwest's beef roads. Difficult in daylight, but even more of a test in the dark. It was darkness that cars ran through from Port Hedland, through the mining town of Shea Gap, and then on into the Kimberleys, a region where cattle properties are measured in the hundreds of square kilometres and homesteads are few and far between. A fact which was brought home to us when we tried to alert authorities about a tragic accident which happened on the road to Kununurra.
We had the opportunity of reporting to you. We've been through some of the most interesting and most rugged country in Australia. First of all, we had an absolute horror trial stage yesterday, which was driving down creek beds over huge boulders and rocks. Absolutely a nightmare for the car. We've had long, dusty running. We've had sandy river crossings. We've had terrible conditions all around. Included was a very fast trip through the Kimberley Ranges during the course of last night, which was a pity because the Kimberley Ranges must be one of the most scenic parts of Australia, but we didn't have time to see anything of the scenery. We simply had to keep moving. Tragedy struck in the Kimberley Ranges for one crew from Sydney, and we were the first car on the scene. They'd been travelling ahead of us, and rounding a left-hand bend at the end of a straight,
through a gutter or a little creek crossing. The car was rolled, and when we come along a couple of minutes later, 2 of the crew members were already dead. It shocked us, it shocked all the competitors. I think I would have to say that many of the competitors now feel that the times set have been too hard, that there haven't been enough rest breaks, and that fatigue, if not counteracted very soon, is going to take a major toll of competitors. We've protested to officials demanding that there be longer rest breaks. We hope that that happens. Looking at a map, Darwin somehow seemed like a turning point. But when we sat down in Darwin and totted up the kilometres back to Melbourne, it still seemed a long way to go. It was never easy going. Down to Katherine via the Alligator River, and across to the Gulf country to Borroloola, then over a maze of tracks with car-burying potholes hidden under dust to Burketown. At Burketown, enterprising locals charged each crew member $5 to pass through a boom gate, allegedly to bring attention to their claim to have the worst roads in Australia. We had to agree with them. Then it was south to Mount Isa and back up through the dust and sand and dust to Georgetown before hitting the coast at Cairns and beginning the downhill run. As the kilometres ticked off, most drivers tried harder to keep their cars in one piece, although Jeff Portman kept on rolling his Datsun and then gluing it together with tape. Ingham, the really rough roads were pretty well over, and now the rally became a race against time over the forestry trails of the east coast. We were back into true rally territory.
Well, still working all right. That was an interesting little section, but like the ordinary forestry section at home. A lot of dust, and there's some traffic going the other way, so I hope competitors are pretty careful in there. So far the car's still working all right. Front struts are getting a bit soft. We did put another set in Darwin, but naturally the constant pounding has softened them up a bit. So tomorrow morning we'll need to put in some struts again, probably change the brake pads, and she should be just about right for the home run.
Between Trebon and Ingham.
As roads became easier, it also became harder to stay awake. The driver of this Mazda 323, Dennis Parsons, dozed off coming into Rockhampton, putting himself and his wife, who was navigating, into hospital. But it seemed our shares of troubles were over, and the NBN Young and Green Commodore rolled into Charlestown feeling just about as good as it did at the start of the rally, 12 days and some 18,000 kilometres ago. Well, almost as good. Charlestown was almost a disaster for rally leader Peter Brock. His crew didn't realise there was a checkpoint there, and they were well on their way to Sydney when they found out. A rush trip back to the shopping centre put things right, but the mistake could have cost Brock the rally. As a measure of the interest the rally aroused, a huge crowd turned out at Oran Park to see the surviving cars compete over a special stage which used part of the circuit and part of the spectator areas. It must have been a rather disappointing spectacle because nobody was taking any chances, and many of the cars were no longer capable of producing much in the way of pace. But there was no let-up on drivers as the cars were led south through the forests around Canberra, then up through low cloud into the snow-capped mountains around Falls Creek. As the cars came out of the mountains, it was obvious the Holden dealer team had pulled off what many had thought impossible. They had come in 1, 2 and 3 and were being led by a driver more experienced in racing than rallying. And now the best placed northern entry was the Lancer of Ian Hill, Dale Loader and Frank Neal, now in 7th place after what must have been a pretty tiring ride in such a small car. And Revs Rowney, the battler of the rally, was still in there with his Datsun puttering along on 3 cylinders. So late in the rally, with Melbourne virtually in sight, crews became super sensitive to every rattle, every vibration, every unusual noise in their tired cars. morning. Here we are with only one more trial stage to go. And it's been a long night through the Victorian Alps, all around the Omeo Highway area. Very interesting roads, very fast, very twisty and rocky in places, up above the snow line. And we've survived. Just one more to go. We hope we can survive that too. And then it'll be plain sailing to the finish. Then, as suddenly as it all began, the rally was over. And those long, dusty kilometres were only a memory as 10,000 people turned out to welcome the 92 finishers into Melbourne Showground. Of the 167 which started, only 13 completed every part of the Round Australia course. Our trouble with the engine at Norseman meant we dropped 3 controls and came home in 17th place. We were happy enough just to be at the finish. Even happier were the victorious Holden dealer team, Novocastrians Wayne Bell and Dave Boddy, even wasting some perfectly good champagne. The rally was obviously a great personal victory for Peter Brock, the driver all the experts had thought would go too fast and be too hard on his car.
Peter, does this win mean more to you than any other win in your motorsport career?
Probably similar to first time at Bathurst. It's been so long coming, though, this whole event, to get it over and done with, that the shut-off point sort of isn't quite as clearly defined. But I guess in the next couple of days when I sit back and relax, I can start realising the significance of this event, really.
Once you found yourself out in front, was there a special pressure on you to know just how fast to drive and how much to save the car?
Yes, I think so, yes. I think I treated that side of it very much the same as I treat a car at Bathurst. I saved the engine and gearbox so that I could give it a bit of a blast when I had to. I tried to dodge all the rough stuff. I didn't succeed.
But while there was only one winner, further down the field, there was still a lot of satisfaction to be had from merely finishing. Murray Finlay explains how we felt.
Satisfaction? My word. The satisfaction of knowing that while we didn't make it into the prize money, or not into the major prize money, we got here not too far behind the leaders, and a very warm, rewarding feeling of having got around and done something that a lot of other people couldn't do.
The best placed northern competitor was Ian Hill from Gosford, who with Frank Neal and Dale Loader brought the little Lancer into 7th position outright and first in its class. Others to finish from the north were Harold Maloney and Paul Daly and Ian Vitnell in the P76, the Palmer brothers and Ron Fraser in their P76, and John Dick and Barry Lloyd in the small Colt, which had lots of troubles but managed to get to the finish. But the man who had the most trouble getting to the finish and still managed to get there in 13th place was Revs Rowney.
It all started off with front radius arm rods. We done 3 of them. If we could have had another week preparing the car, it wouldn't have happened, which would have saved us hours. We never had spares in the car, and we just had to limp along with the jack tied to them to hold the wheel forward. And then we done a clutch. We were ready to go out at one service point and done a clutch, and we had to change that. And besides various punches, which everyone's in the same boat pretty well.
Then you had a diff?
Yes, we had a diff on the other side of Newcastle the last night before Newcastle, and been running on 3 cylinders for 3,660 mile approximately, I think it is, right to here, and tell you, it's hard.